Hello everyone. Today I'm going to sing a song composed by Rabindranath Tagore at the age of 32. At Cambridge, I give a series of lectures on Hindu devotionalism, bhakti. This song is in effect a drop of the essence of the philosophical content of all those lectures. It embodies the paradox of God as the intimate stranger, which recurs through vast bodies of Hindu devotional poetry. God is interwoven with the fibers of our precarious being, yet because we are estranged from God, we are unable to feel God's mantle enveloping us continually. Our commentator today is Swami Medhananda, who is a monk of the Ramakrishna order and a senior research fellow in philosophy at the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Antare jagicho, antaro jami, antaro jami, antare jagicho, antaro jami, antaro jami, tobo সদা দূরে ভ্রমিতেছি আমি অন্তরে জাগিছ অন্তরে জাগিছ সংসার সুখ করেছি বরণ সংসার সুখ করেছি বরণ তবু তুমি মম জীবন স্বামী অন্তরে জাগিছ অন্তরে জাগিছ না জানিয়া পথ ভ্রমিতেছি পথে আপন গরবে অসীম জগতে না জানিয়া পথ ভ্রমিতেছি পথে আপন গরবে অসীম জগতে তবু স্নেহ নেত্র জাগে ধ্রুব তারা তবু স্নেহ নেত্র জাগে ধ্রুব তারা তব শুভ আশিস আসিছে নামি অন্তরে জাগিছ অন্তরে জাগিছ
I'd like to thank Professor Ankur Barua at Cambridge University for kindly inviting me to speak today on this extraordinary song, Antore Jagicho Antoro Jami, of Rabindranath Tagore's. I'm not an expert in Tagore, that's just a disclaimer, and I don't pretend to be, but it's an extraordinary song. It's one that moves me every time I hear it, and maybe just in a few minutes I'll try to explain why I find it so moving. Let me begin by giving a rough translation of the song, of the lyrics of the song. I did it very quickly, but here's roughly what I came up with. O inner controller, you are ever awake in my heart. Yet I am always wandering far away from you. I have ever been preoccupied with worldly pleasures, and yet you are still the Lord and Master of my life. I have lost my way in this vast universe due to my own ignorance and pride. yet you always cast your gracious glance upon me and ever bestow your blessings upon me. It's always the case with Tagore's songs, and in general with Bengali songs and poetry, that these songs are untranslatable. And this is no exception. The rhythm, the pacing, the word choice, you just can't reproduce that in another language. And in the original Bangla, there are features that I think are really crucial to the feeling, the bhava behind the song. Let me read the Bangla really quickly. Ontore jagicho ontore jami, tobu সদা দূরে ভ্রমিতেছি আমি, সংসার সুখ করেছি বরণ, তবু তুমি মম জীবন স্বামী, না জানিয়া পথ প্রমিতেছি পথে, আপন গরবে অসীম জগতে, তবু স্নেহ নেত্র জাগে ধ্রুব তারা, তব শুভ আশিস আসিছে নামি. So one thing that's striking that I think, just formally speaking, about this song is the thrice repeated word tobu. Tobu in Bangla means yet or nonetheless. And I think that the pathos of the song really lies in the contrast between the singer's heartfelt devotion toward God and at the same time his feelings of his own unworthiness and his entanglements in this world. And this word tobu, the yet, the nonetheless, that's the whole kind of pivot of the entire song. Again and again, in each of the sentences, there's a tobu that applies. Oh Lord, you're dwelling in my heart, and yet I'm wandering all over the world not finding you. I'm constantly engaged in worldly pleasures, and yet you remain the Lord of my heart. And so on and so forth. So the pathos is really in the starkness of the contrast between our feelings of our own unworthiness and the graciousness of God, who accepts us and loves us in spite of our weaknesses and limitations. And one thing that I find really interesting about not just this song, but many of Tagore's songs and many devotional songs in general, at least in an Indian context, is that a heartfelt expression of your own unworthiness, of your own weakness, can itself be turned into a strength. That's the beauty of bhakti. That through bhakti, through devotion, your greatest weakness can become your greatest strength. Just by confessing your weaknesses to God, confessing your sins to God. Sri Ramakrishna would say, whatever you've done, confess whatever you've done with tears in your eyes to God. And those tears will wipe away the mud or dirt covering over God in your heart. It'll make you pure. Sri Ramakrishna, he used to say, if you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you'll find it mentioned many times. He would say, Kali Yuge Naradiya Bhakti. He said, in this Kali Yuga, Naradiya Bhakti is the best path for most people. Naradiya Bhakti means the path of devotion taught by Narada. And when people asked him, what exactly do you mean by that? He would often say, Nam Guno Kirtan. Take God's name, repeat God's name, sing God's name, and celebrate God's qualities as well. So worship God, think of God, call on God, repeat the name of God. Bhakti. And prayer is another important practice within bhakti. So Sri Ramakrishna would often say that for this age, this Kali Yuga, what makes it Kali Yuga? Because we're tremendously body conscious, because we're sort of deeply identified with the body. And because of that, these other kinds of practices, especially Advaita Vedanta, for instance, he would warn against. He would say that nobody who has body consciousness should practice Advaita Vedanta, because it could lead to that person's own ruin and to deceiving other people. So it's very risky. Bhakti, the beauty of bhakti is that there are no eligibility requirements. You don't have to be of a certain spiritual caliber to get off the ground with bhakti. Everybody's eligible by dint of being a human being. And bhakti takes you where you are. It accepts you where you are and it holds you by the hand and kind of takes you up step by step to the highest. So I think this song is a good example of that. The person, the singer, is confessing to God his own limitations, his own weaknesses, his love for worldly things, and at the same time, that confession itself, because it's heartfelt, it embodies one of the most fundamental spiritual qualities, which is a spirit of vyakulata. In Bangla, bakulata. Sri Ramakrishna would talk about it a lot. He would say that what the essential thing in spiritual life is bakulata. And this song really embodies this feeling of longing for the divine. And as I said, the pathos of the song is that the person, in confessing that he has all these worldly attachments, that he's constantly forgetting about God, by confessing it to God, that itself, it kind of becomes its opposite. And it itself becomes an expression of genuine, heartfelt devotion toward and longing for God. Another thing that I think about when I think about songs, devotional songs, and their role in spiritual life, something Tagore knew really well. I like to think sometimes of spiritual life as the journey from head to heart. The journey from head to heart. What I mean by that is often, at least in my own case, I can be honest and say, my spiritual life, it began kind of from the top down. It was very intellectual. I was intellectually enamored with a certain philosophy, and the spiritual practice itself was very mental. But what happens is slowly, as you go deeper in spiritual life, you somehow feel no longer satisfied with mental spiritual practices, with just stopping at the mind. And I'm reminded of a beautiful line from Bhagavad Gita. There's a phrase, mano hridi niruddhyacha, stopping the mind in the heart, or restraining the mind in the heart. So I think as we deepen our spiritual life, many of us come to the point where we start to feel the need to really move from head to heart. And singing and listening to great devotional music really helps us in this endeavor. I'm also reminded of a great Irish poet, William Butler Yeats. He composed a great poem toward the end of his life called The Circus Animal's Desertion. And the last three lines are, now that my ladder's gone, I must lie down where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. So music helps us to access the heart that many of us are running away from most of the time. I'm also reminded of a great British poet, T.S. Eliot. In Four Quartets, he refers to music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. You are the music while the music lasts. And that's the beauty of music. That's the spiritual power of music, is that by listening to a great devotional song, no matter what your weaknesses and limitations are, even if you're completely devoid of devotion, if for those few moments of listening to that song with rapt concentration, you're moved by the song, what you're able to do is inhabit the standpoint of the singer. And you can feel the bhava that the singer is expressing in the song. So for those moments that you're deeply concentrated in just listening to the music or singing the song, you can actually feel that tremendous longing for the divine, that devotion for the divine that saints have. And that's why so many great philosophers in the West also praise the power of music, especially like Schopenhauer talks about it a lot. I also wanted to mention that Tagore's second song from Gitanjali, he explains this, it expresses, the last four lines express the same idea, so I just want to read the Bangla and then I'll explain it very briefly. Mon diye jar nagal nahi paye, gan diye shei choron chhuye jay, shurer ghore apnake jay bhule, bondhu bole daki mor prabhuke. Beautiful lines. He's saying, that divine, which I can never reach, no matter how hard I try, by means of the mind, gan diye shei choron chhuye jay, I'm able to touch the lotus feet of that divine by means of song, gan diye. Shurer ghore apnake jay bhule. In my state of divine inebriation, spiritual intoxication, I forget myself. Bundu bole daki mor prabhuke. And I call the divine, I call God my friend, as if he's my peer. So these are wonderful lines. And this song, Ontore Jagicho Ontore Jami, I think that there's a deep connection. Through music, we can access the highest, we can tap into some of the deepest spiritual sentiments. Thank you.